Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of Sports Talk with Hawk. I am Hawk, and welcome into the podcast on this beautiful Thursday morning. It is very early morning, so if anything has happened uh, today, this podcast will not reflect it in the 4 hours that'll be different between the time I record this and the time that it is released. So do keep that in mind. But we are going to play a little bit of a game. I know I didn't release a podcast yet this week. I actually have it recorded. Had the recap from the weekend recorded and my first thoughts heading into this weekend with the divisional playoff game. Since that didn't get released, I'm just going to kind of snapshot it. I went 6-0 last week. If you don't believe me, go back and listen to my picks podcast for the wild card playoff. I picked Notre Dame, I picked Ohio State, and then I picked all of the wild card games. I had a fantastic weekend in picks. I picked the Texans, I picked the Commanders, and looking forward to this weekend. And that will be Saturday. So I'm going to have Saturday mornings, roughly around noon, is when I'm hoping the podcast will be released. Saturday around noon should have the Picks podcast released, which will have all the playoff games for this weekend, plus, then the also the national championship game as well. So we're going to play a game today that is going to be like when you go to the eye doctor and they're checking your eyes and they're going through everything and trying to get your prescription dialed in. We're going to play a game called Option 1, Option 2, Option A, Option B. When they're constantly flipping that little lens inside the eye machine to get you to be able to see the best that you can. So we're going to do this with head coaching candidates, and we're going to do this with some teams that still have a head coach. Actually, primarily one. Over the weekend, I was right on the Mike Vrabel hire. I said it when Mayo got fired. Mike Vrabel will take the job. There's no question. Mike Vrabel is the candidate for the New England Patriots. I did say last weekend that Mike McCarthy was not going to be returning to Dallas. Shefty made it sound like it was breaking news on Monday, trying to beat Ian Rappaport to it, and made himself look like a fool because all he reported is a source has said they won't get back together. Duh, we already knew that. Ian Rappaport 5 minutes later told us why. So Shefty is still acting like the child in high school that's trying to be the guy that everybody looks up to again after his screw up still from now many years ago, and not obviously that long, but quite a few years removed from the Andrew Luck saga. But here's the thing about head coaching. Mike Vrabel, I believe, will have the Patriots winning 8 games next year. I know some of you are like, are you kidding me? No, I'm not. They got the Falcons' 3rd round pick for Judon. They've got a head coach that people will want to go play for. Don't forget, this is the guy that had Ryan Tannehill as the number 1 seed in the AFC. He's got Drake May. Ramondre Stevenson is on a very short leash with his fumbling issues. Very short leash. Very. I can't wait to do the New England Patriots 2025 outlook when we get to those podcasts, which will be probably after the conference championship games. We'll start looking at all that because I want to take one podcast per team. Like I've said, shorter podcasts, easier to listen to. Mike Vrabel fits New England. There was no option 2. It was option 1A flat, that's it. But most organizations and most teams, there isn't a clear number 1 fit. So we're going to play option 1, option 2. Everybody's interviewing everyone. The Jets have interviewed no less than 700 people at this point between their general manager and head coaching position. I don't get it. I really don't. So here's what we're going to do. Option 1 and option 2. And we're going to start with the New York Jets. Now, this is my opinion. I'm not going to label these as predictions. This is my opinion of who the 2 best options are. And if I end up getting them right, fantastic. If they're not, we always have surprises. These are who I would hire based on the current state of the team and what is needed. The New York Jets, you guys know I love Rex Ryan. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this team. I love Rex Ryan for this job again. They need to bring legitimacy. Mike Vrabel is now in this division as a head coach. Mike McDaniel and the chaos of the Miami Dolphins are going to be fourth if the Jets can just nail this coach down. And I got to be honest, Rex Ryan feels like a guy that has the attitude. I think he's watched enough from the sidelines. I think the personality on ESPN sometimes gets overblown. We've heard the real reality of ESPN, how they try to push narratives. They try to make sure that there's arguments on, the panels. They don't want everybody agreeing. It's somewhat staged, just like WWE is, slightly rehearsed and planned. I think Rex Ryan really has a grasp on what it takes to win in the NFL right now. And if I'm Woody Johnson, I'm giving him the reins back. I'm giving him a 3-year contract, maybe a 4, but I'm giving him a 3-year deal and saying, I want you to get me somebody who can replace you. Because Rex Ryan is getting older. He's not going to want to coach forever. Get me somebody who can replace you. Groom the next guy so that we can continue the success this time after you're gone. That's what I would tell him. Option number 2 is another former coach, Pete Carroll. I know. Are you sure? Really? Yeah, I am. Yes, I am. Pete Carroll will be able to work with that defense. I do worry about the offense with the Jets still. Carroll doesn't bring the same toughness as Rex Ryan does. I don't think they become as dynamic of a team. But Pete Carroll could win 8 games with the Jets. Pete Carroll could, with a GM that knows what he's doing and continuing to draft like the Jets have, could be just as good. I think the Jets have to go backwards before they can go forwards. I really do. I don't think a Ben Johnson should go to New York. I don't think it's a smart idea to put them in that New York media. The Jets' job is a lot harder to deal with than the Giant job is, because you don't have the protection of the Mara family. Although they seem to be a little bit chaotic right now, the Mara family kind of gives you a little bit of credit because they've had success. They're the New York Football Giants. You're the New York Jets. Like, that's what you are. And I don't think a first-time coach is going to work out there. I wouldn't hire a first-time coach right now. You need to bring back something that's going to rebuild the culture, get the toughness back in the team. And that's why I think Rex Ryan is the number one option. Option two should be Pete Carroll. Now, when you move on and you go to the Chicago Bears, I have always thought that Mike McCarthy is a great spot for Chicago, more because of the fact of the organization, who has to be fought in this organization. For those of you that may not know, Virginia McCaskey is 102 years old. George McCaskey is definitely getting up there in age, and most of the McCaskey family don't want the Bears. But Virginia's not going to sell. It's an unfortunate thing because the kids don't want this business. I asked my dad the other day, or I made this comment to my dad the other day when we were talking about stuff. I said, most people don't really care about how millionaires and billionaires think or how they feel. But I said, has anybody ever actually asked Mark Davis, do you really want to own the Raiders? Your dad gave it to you, or you got it when your dad passed away. But do you really want to run the Raiders? I think he has fun doing it. I'm not saying that, but does he really want to own the Raiders? The McCaskey family is very, very upfront. They don't want the Bears. The Bears will be a better organization the minute they are sold. And I believe Mike McCarthy could be that coach that could bridge the two sides of the McCaskeys and who the new ownership group is. I think he brings a stability factor where he'll make you relevant. He'll make you a team that can win games. Not going to cause a bunch of drama. I believe it's a good fit. To me, that's option one. Option two would be Marcus Freeman. The fear I have with Freeman is I just fear there's going to be a bunch of quarreling in the organization. Because Marcus Freeman isn't going to give two craps about what Kevin Warren thinks as president of football when he was the Big Ten commissioner. He's now the president of football, but has no accountability for what he does and all the bad decisions he's made. And Marcus Freeman won't stand for that. Look at how he's handled Notre Dame. Freeman understands tradition. Freeman understands accountability. Freeman understands excellence. He legitimately gets play like a champion today. And I think it would absolutely revitalize the Chicago Bears organization, but I don't know if they can get out of the way of Marcus Freeman to do it. I think he could be a great NFL coach. I really do. I like Marcus Freeman. He looks like a different type of Sean McVay to me. Option two would be Sean McVay. For me, because I don't think he's going to have the ability to handle Kevin Warren and the structure of the Bears the way that Mike McCarthy will. Mike McCarthy can tread around, figure out different avenues. He's been around the block. He understands what he has to do. And I think he could bridge the two sides of ownership. Freeman, I think, could bring more energy to the organization. I think he'd bring a lot of accountability. I think he'd have a lot of success. But I don't believe the Bears would get out of the way. That's my issue. Option one, McCarthy for the Bears. Option two, Marcus Freeman. Let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I have gone over this in my, I don't like admitting any of this because they're in the same division. And either way, they're going to get a coach that's tougher than mine for the Indianapolis Colts. They're going to get a coach either way that has more accountability, more ability to stand up and actually have a legit set of rules that people know what's going on and can respect. The fly-by-night operation and secrecy. So with that in mind, although most, I bet, are starting to think that I'm going to say Ben Johnson, option number one for me for Jacksonville is really simple. It's Brian Flores. That defense has the dudes. And if I'm Brian Flores, I'm bringing in Thaddeus Lewis, Brian Griese. I'm bringing in a young offensive coordinator to work with the offense which has pieces, but the defense has dudes. If you remember earlier in the year, I was talking about the four prongs. Schematics with the scheme, players, the ownership, like the different prongs of a team. And for Jacksonville, I said this is a scheme issue. Doug Peterson, absolutely out of touch, needs to have a year off, go watch some college football, or go coach college football, learn what the new stuff is, learn what these new kids can do, and then he can come back as an offensive coordinator. His defensive coordinator, the schemes were absolute garbage. Absolute garbage. Ryan Neeson deserved to be fired. They'd never know. Go back to being a defensive backs coach or whatever you are. You're not a defensive coordinator. That was an absolutely piss poor job. So option number one for me is Brian Flores. He will bring a big toughness. If you remember the years between the Colts and the Jaguars were the team that always played us tough when we had Peyton Manning, Wayne, James, Oradai, Harrison. The Jaguars were always the team that played us tough. Why? I remember two defensive tackles named Marcus Stroud and John freaking Henderson. We couldn't run the damn ball. And they were so tall. John Henderson was 6'7", so tall that when they put their arms up in the air, even Peyton Manning had a hard time throwing over them. They were big. They were physical. To me, this defense has the ability to go back to that. Trevor Lawrence can be Byron Leftwich, David Garrard. Shoot, if you're Brian Flores, bring in Byron Leftwich. Bring back the Jacksonville guy. Bring him back. Give him the opportunity to make this offense and show what he can do without Tom Brady. The offense has pieces. They need to draft a few more of them. The defense has dudes. I think because of what Flores did in Minnesota, taking B players, C plus B players, and having a defense like that, the Jacksonville Jaguar defense, when healthy, will be something that nobody wants to face. So that's option one. Option two, still stay in defense. Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn will bring in an offensive coordinator. Just look at Detroit. Ben Johnson will know the value of a good defensive coordinator. Aaron Glenn knows the value of a good offensive coordinator. And they both know what it takes to have a team be on a championship level because they've both been a part of a building process that has gotten this team there with the Detroit Lions. I like Aaron Glenn as the head coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I do think he'd be able to relate to the players. Defensively, I think he'd absolutely be able to inspire them, really hold them accountable, and then bring in a guy that can do the offense and do the offense really well and give it to him. Give it to him. Be who you want to be as a coach. You're in a division where you're really only facing the Texans right now because the Colts have a coach that he may be an okay offensive coordinator. If I'm honest, he's probably a B plus offensive coordinator, which can win you a lot of games. Gus Bradley was a bad defensive coordinator. Now he acted a lot more like Bill Belichick, not willing to adapt, not willing to learn what needed to be done now. Stuck in an old 4-3 system that had no flair to it. So I like both the defensive coaches for Jacksonville. Now, when you move off of Jacksonville, you go down to the New Orleans Saints. The Saints, I can remember the coaches. I remember Jim Haslett. Jim Mora was the coach for them before I really started watching football, because then he was the coach for the Indianapolis Colts. I remember Mike Ditka because I was around for the Ricky Williams, trade debacle that ended up happening. Sean Payton, Dennis Allen, that just didn't work. We knew it last year. It took them they decided in the middle of the season, no, this isn't working. Option one for the New Orleans Saints, I do believe, is Ben Johnson. I really do. If I'm Ben Johnson and I don't know why I'd want the Bears job. Now, maybe there's a friendly rivalry between him and Dan Campbell, which is fine. I want to take the Bears job. You've been in that division. You know what it's going to take to beat any of those teams in that division. I know there's guys that love a challenge, but gosh darn. If I'm Ben Johnson, I like the prospects of New Orleans if, when I'm interviewed, they say, this year's a gimme year, we're going to shed cap, it's going to be a dead cap year, we're going to work on building afterwards. They give you stability as a head coach. They don't fire people willy-nilly. They let Sean Payton run everything out. The organization is smarter. The only thing about the Saints job that really worries everybody is the cap situation. They're older. There's some pieces. Alvin Kamara signed for 3 years, except you just don't know about the health. This year was the healthiest year. And I got to be honest, if I have Kamara for 12 of the 17 games, I'll take it, because in my mind, I'm winning 10 of those 12. He's that dynamic. So that's what I'm thinking. Ben Johnson could easily revive Derek Carr. Chris Olave, not sure if he's going to stay or if he's going to retire due to the concussions. Rashid Shaheed is a free agent. They need him to come back. Taysom Hill is a weird thing. I get all the cons, but the organization is steady. The organization is stable. It's a division that you could potentially win. It's going to be competitive, but it's a young competitive. Penix, Bryce Young, Baker Mayfield, and Todd Bowles. The Bucs are older. They're not younger, really. They're older. So I think the Saints option at 1 would be Ben Johnson. Now option 2 would be Brian Flores. Why? I think he fits the Bayou. I think he fits New Orleans. It's that simple. I absolutely believe he fits New Orleans. Now, I'm not going to do this for every team, but there's an option 3, and it's Eric Bieniemy. I believe he deserves a head coaching opportunity. He went to college. He wasn't fired. I've been over this already. It was already in the, built into the contract. He was leaving after a year, but instead of signing a 1-year deal, they quote unquote fired him, but it wasn't a firing. He wants to go back to the NFL. I think 1 year in college to see the landscape, and it was in the Big Ten, so he saw all these Big Ten teams play. 1 year in college will absolutely help Eric Bieniemy coach at the NFL level. It's going to give him that little bit different view that a lot of coaches are missing now. A little bit different understanding. And I think Bieniemy works in New Orleans as well. So there's 3 options for the New Orleans Saints. Ben Johnson, Brian Flores, Eric Bieniemy. All right, next one. Las Vegas Raiders. The team that's absolutely screwed this up royally. Option number 1 for them, I'm going to say, is Ben Johnson. I think they want Ben Johnson. I think Brady's going to tell Mark Davis we want Ben Johnson. They want Ben Johnson. Okay. Here's an issue. That could be option 1. But my fear is if it's not Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's going to be coveted by the Bears, the Jags, the Jets, maybe the Cowboys. I'm not really sure. Maybe the Cowboys. The Raiders. Something doesn't feel right, though. If I'm the Raiders, option 1, Mike Tomlin. I know. I've heard all the reports. I've heard everything else. Option number 1, Mike Tomlin. Brings a presence. In that division, you're not going to outscore everybody easily. You need a defense. Absolutely believe he'd be the spot here as option 1. 1A, fine, Ben Johnson. Something just doesn't feel right about the Raiders right now. And coaches aren't going to get starry-eyed by Tom Brady being a partial owner. People do. Coaches won't. Look at the turmoil they just created by firing Pierce, not firing Telesco. Brady talking to Vrabel saying he'd want to bring in his own GM. Them firing Telesco to hopefully get Vrabel. Vrabel goes to New England. They are now out a coach that had the team playing hard and a GM that knows exactly what he's doing because they're stupid. This is why I asked, does Mark Davis really want to own the Raiders? He's not. It doesn't feel all in. maybe he needs to sell as well. Option 1A is probably Ben Johnson. Option 1B, I believe, is Mike Tomlin. Now, option 2, guy that I think legitimately could work with Las Vegas. I believe there's an aspect of this that I think Cliff Kingsbury may get a call because of what he did with Jayden Daniels. I really do. I don't know if you take it. I don't think he'd want to after a year. I think he's having fun. Maybe Cliff Kingsbury is set up. Coaches learn. Mike Tomlin can't win at the end of the year right now. That was our gripe on Cliff Kingsbury. Can't win at the end of the year. Yeah, you're right. Look at how long Mike Tomlin's been around. Gets fired, goes to a couple different places, is now the offensive coordinator with Washington. He's learned. Getting fired doesn't mean the end of your career. Tony Dungy, Bill Belichick, Andy Reid. Getting fired doesn't mean the end of your coaching career. Sometimes you need it to give you that different perspective so that you can come back with a fresh view in a different location with a whole new lookout on what you're trying to accomplish. I think Kingsbury is option number 2. I really do. So there's the Raiders. So we've gone over the Bears, Jaguars, Saints, Jets. Okay, the Patriots job is already taken. Now we get to the Dallas Cowboys. Oh, the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know. Deion Sanders feels like a flashy move. But as I've said before, can Deion be Deion? I know he'll argue with Jerry. Can Deion be Deion in the NFL? I know who I think's going to get hired, but option 1 for me here absolutely would be Ben Johnson. But you got to draft correctly. You've missed on first round picks. The Lions haven't missed on anybody. I don't believe. I don't agree with Michael Irvin. Michael Irvin, the point is there. So he was on one of the shows. He was on with Colin the other day. And Troy Aikman came out on ESPN, Monday before the playoff game going, I don't think the Cowboys' job is a coveted job. And Irvin clapped back, going, of course it's coveted. There's only 32 of them. He has a point. And you want any proof of that, any proof you want. Dave Canales to the Carolina Panthers last year after Dan Morgan became the GM. David Tepper, everything that was going on around that organization, in that organization, the talk, everything else. Big coaches didn't want to touch it. Canales took the job. So Irvin is right on one aspect. All the head coaching jobs are coveted. It's not coveted by the correct people. Now, Canales has worked with Bryce Young. He may end up working out. But your big guys that are known are not coveting the Dallas job. They don't want to be the Dallas Cowboy head coach. Listening and reading some of the things, Jerry Jones got affected by two major things this year. The empty seats in the stadium and the amount of opposing fans. Fans were selling to opposing fans. The amount of empty seats and opposing fans. And the apathy around the team as if nobody really cares. Well, we don't. And unfortunately, Jerry, you're the one that made us not care. Because you decided you're the owner and you can do everything. And we've all worked for owners or bosses like that, and we don't respect you. It's one thing to be the boss. It's another thing to act like the boss. And it's a whole different thing to be a boss that people want to have you as a boss. Nobody respects Jerry. That's the problem. He's created a financial wealth. He's created a brand wealth. He's not created a team wealth. There's going to be a lot of names that are floated out for this Dallas Cowboy job. I don't know if Dion's right. Ben Johnson feels good here because they'll bring in a defensive coordinator. I do think they need to trade Micah for a first-round pick, and a fifth-round pick. They need guys. They need guys. They need guys. And Ben Johnson could get the offense taken care of. Look what he's done with Jared Goff, who I believe is better than Dak Prescott. But look what he's done with Jared Goff. You're stuck with Prescott. You're stuck with $129 million guaranteed. You got to lean into it. You got CeeDee Lamb. You got Prescott. You're going to draft a running back. Ben Johnson to me is option one. Option two, he's kind of cooled off. I'd still say Cliff Kingsbury, maybe, but Bobby Slowick as well. I'm going to go with option two being Cliff Kingsbury because, Jerry likes guys that are known, the hot guys, hot shot guys. He wants to make a splash, so I think that's what he'll do. That's really where I think it's at. I think it's those two options. So, there you go. That's where we're going to end it. No final thought, or no final thoughts for this. Let's end this here before we get to 41 minutes on the podcast. Option one, option two. Each team. That's where I would go for each team based off of what they need and where the team needs to get to in the trajectory. All right, guys, as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe. It is Thursday. Have a great rest of your day, and I will chat with you tomorrow. Probably go over whatever news has happened in the 4 hours since I did this. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. For Sports Talk with Hawk, I'm Hawk, and I'm out.